What's up, everyone? Welcome to another Team Kitchen Fable video. I'm here with a good chunk of our team, and we're going to be reviewing the Tales of Aria meta. So we're going to be reflecting on the pre-ban meta and just talking about what we think, putting it into a tier list, and maybe there will be some reflection on what we think will change moving forward. So let's go ahead and get started. It's not by, I guess it is by accident that Azalea is at the start, but team, what do you guys think about Azalea in the Tales of Aria meta?
Azalea who?
All right. Sounds like we've got a D tier to start off. Guys,
Yeah,
just stay
still
unmuted.
D. She got a little better because she's in Blade, but she's still D.
Yeah, I think she is that solid Runeblade counter. We saw some Azalea shut down Chane players even in the Seeds meta, and I'm not surprised to see Azalea in the D tier, independent of her ability to slow Briar down. Next up, we've got a personal favorite of some of our team members, Boltyn. Where do we think Boltyn lies?
C.
Yeah, probably a C.
I was leaning B, like a B and a half.
Yes.
As was I.
B.
He
C and a half.
B for both.
I too go with the
C
like
based
a
off
C
results.
plus, basically. Yeah, I mean it's
C and a half.
Are we talking in
combo-
Jimmy's hands or in general?
sure.
I mean, in Jimmy's hands, we need a tier above S.
Yeah, I think Boltyn B is fair. I mean, Saber's Boltyn did have a good showing in the Calling Orlando. You saw him at some of the top tables. I think he eventually fell off once you got towards like rounds 9, 10, 11. But Raiden Boltyn did do a good job of, dishing out damage close to what Briar could, but due to the lack of efficiency, the end game was really tough for him, and his ability to board into Sabers for those control matchups. I don't think I can justify putting him at C, but I don't think there's a world where I ever justify putting him at A. I think that's the funny thing about Boltyn. Any final thoughts on Boltyn, guys? Sweet. All right, we're going to go ahead and move into Bravo. I'm going to go ahead and do this for us. I think he lands here. Do you guys agree or disagree?
Agree.
No disagreements here.
That's fair.
Yep.
Yeah, Bravo needed to have very specific plans for heroes in the Tales of Aria meta, and they were not very similar to previous metas. I think that's why we saw Kale take Bravo so far at the New Zealand Mats. But if you look at his list, it's quite a bit different, and you have different cards being taken advantage of. And it was kind of hard to crack that code and get past Briar once they figured out how to conserve their resources and go for bigger end of game kills.
Nice. I think that's a great analysis. Moving on to Chane, everyone's favorite Runeblade. I'm going to do it again, and I'm going to see what you guys think. How do we feel about Chane and A?
That's
Yeah,
fair.
no arguments on that one.
Yeah, I think
Seems good.
clearly the only thing holding them back just being the number of generics you're running for that kind of gameplay, and always has the potential to backfire. It still ends up being a smaller than what people thought would be a big inconsistency, but overall just the next best aggro hero.
Yeah, and I've gotten I was meaning Chane pre-ban and post-ban, and yes, the plunder on hit was made it slightly worse, but Chane is still extremely powerful.
Yeah.
Spellbound Creepers is not banned yet, so
Yeah, he had a lot of cards taken away from him, but he still remains to be a very formidable foe, constantly evolving to do so.
Nice. So I'm gonna place my girl Dash right here into the B tier. I thought about putting her in C, and the reason that I didn't was because she had favorable matchups into pretty much everyone except for Briar. at least in the meta from what we'll see moving up. I think Dash performed just fine against Chane. The loss of seeds kind of made Briar able to, or made Dash able to not have to worry about sequencing around Chane or just getting those late game seeds buffs and arcane damage that you just couldn't stop. So I think that that was really good for Dash, and I think obviously Dash plays really well into Bravo and Oldhim, which we'll see higher up on this list. But unfortunately, Dash was just incapable of stopping Channel Mount and Plunder Run at the same time. Briar's ability to push through Dash's defenses and keep her from even boosting because of those embodiment tokens, playing a boost strategy, trying to raise Briar just was not possible where it was possible with Chane. Any thoughts on this team?
I kind of disagree and would lean towards A for Dash for similar reasons, just because of how many good matchups she did have pre and post ban for Tails. I think she was favorable in all of your control matchups, especially going into Bravo. People weren't really on Oldhim at the time. Did well against Prism, and could handle really every hero except for slightly getting blindsided by the aggro potential behind Briar. She handled Lexi just fine as well. And I think just having so many positive matches, or at least breakpoint even matches, would slide her up to A.
Yeah, I think I'll consider her an A- or a B+. I think in some nationals we did see Dash do really well. I know Kiki Labad did exceptional on the classic instructed portion of the New Zealand nationals and was able to take Dash pretty far. So I think that's fair enough. But I do think that on average, you weren't really seeing Dash make the presence that you would see her even in the Monarch era. So I think that's kind of why I think that Dash was more B tier. You just didn't see her break into the top tables as much as you would have liked to see. Although obviously that can be influenced by the nationals format.
For sure. I think the biggest thing for that is just overall representation. You definitely had a lot more players on Briar than Dash for skewing the top tables per se.
So I'm going to move us over to Dorinthea now. Ruby, where do you think Dorinthea sat during the Tales of Aria meta?
I mean, there's argument that she was down as a C. But, Prism did pre-ban. Prism was less prevalent, so, that's one of her worst matchups. So I would say between a C and a D, and I'll let a C and a B, and I'll let the team who has more experience. I don't have too much door experience.
Yeah, I'd be interested to hear Heath's comments, but I kind of have a similar agreement at C. Just there's a limited card pool that once you know it, it's pretty easy to play around the reprise. You kind of know what's coming up, and I think the meta as a whole evolved past that. But I could see between like C or B. It still has consistency, favorable matchups, and I think one of the biggest things is taking wins against players that don't know how to play around that reprise or card pool as well as others.
Yeah, Dora used to be the hero you could not forego blocking against, but heroes like Chane and Briar could pretty easily just outrace her damage output. She used to be the best aggro deck, and she's kind of one of the slower aggro decks in terms of her damage output.
Yeah, I'm in agreement there, and I also think that Bravo and Oldhim shut her out as well. Whether it's defensive Bravo or offensive Bravo, I think you can win that matchup these days. And I think Oldhim just has too much defense for Dorinthea to deal with. So I'm gonna have to agree with C. Let's move on to Lexi. Haziel, what's your take on Lexi here? I think Haziel left. I guess. Yeah.
Oh, Haziel's not here.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. Haziel hopped out. That's rough. So personally, I'm going to be placing Lexi at an A to a B tier. I think we saw some. I mean, we did see some exceptional Lexi play in North America, in the United States and Canada. Obviously, you had Yuki Lee take home Canadian nationals, and you also saw a Lexi presence in the top tables at the U.S. nationals. So I do think that it would be unjustifiable to put her in B, but I do not necessarily think she's an A. I do think that getting through some of those Guardian matchups, and I think what we saw is later in the meta, we saw a lot more Oldhim players come through. And I think because of that, Lexi got pushed out a little bit because she could get blocked out.
For sure. I think also placing her in in that particular order is justifiable as well in terms of Bravo Chane Dash being above her.
Okay. Assuming we have no other thoughts, let's move on to we'll just do that. All right, Kano. Where does Kano sit?
Everyone chuckles. I see him at a C. He's not
Great.
complete. Yeah.
He got better. I think he got better than the previous metas.
Absolutely.
For sure.
I think before we would have placed him down here. I think we did last
Yeah.
time.
Yeah.
But
Yeah,
he's definitely
he's-
a threat.
Yeah, Kano can
Definitely
take down decks like Chane and decks that don't respect the arcane, or people who think they can get by without running 3 null rune.
Takes a very special player to pilot Kano to a win in CC. And I'm not that person, but there are people out there that can do it.
My CC round 1 at Nats came down to a single life point, me surviving to get the kill.
Yep, I did the same thing at
Who were you
Canada
on?
Nationals.
I was on Briar.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, and other chat
Yeah,
was on
Kano is
Katsu.
real. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, Kano's real. I think he's C, but like the player can elevate him to like high B.
Definitely.
It's
Yeah,
really
he could
dependent on
be
the
a B.
pilot. Yeah, but like if you're a really good Kano player, it's probably the only hero we'll put in C and D that can be played up here. I think to that point it's like, is he really a C hero, or do people just not know how to play him? And I think to that point, I think we have to put him in B because he does not compete down here, right? He's not limited. Even the best Dorinthea players cannot push up here, right? But the best Kano players can push up here. And I think that puts him in B tier where he's kind of straddling this line.
Yeah, if we just look at the Tales of Aria meta, no one was running Null Rune 3 or higher.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
considering that fact, he's a B. Maybe an A. If people start to run Null Rune, then he
That's
drops
fair.
a little bit.
That's fair. I think that we'll move on to Katsu now. I think we'll have a lot of varying opinions here. Tyler Broughton, I'd like to hear from you first about Katsu. And I know you are an aggro Katsu specialist, so let's hear about that.
On the aggro side, honestly, in the meta, he's a C, but his potential to be a B or an A. I think he was very underutilized in this meta. People were scared of playing him just because of Oldhim and Ice Lexi. And when you look at other heroes that have 1, maybe 2 bad matches, people still played them. And so he's terrible into Oldhim, but everyone else he can out aggro. And so I just think people were scared to play him.
Yeah, I think that's fair. Chad Spencer, what do you think?
As much as I'd love to give him a high rating, honestly, I'd give him a B. I played mid-range Katsu specifically, so my list is wildly different from aggro. And he holds his own for the most part. Oldham's still a terrible matchup, but every other hero, for the most part, including Briar. Briar was still rough and was probably... Briar was definitely favorable to win, but he could still do it, maybe not consistently. So I give him just a B, a solid B. He wasn't terrible, he wasn't fantastic, but he's still a good contender into almost anybody.
Yeah, I think I'm apt to agree. The more I think about it, the more I have no idea how I placed 15th at the Orlando Calling running mid-range Katsu. I think it was a mixture of the uniqueness of Find Center and making it very easy to land Find Center when you were playing into aggro Briars, and that just allowing you to soak up damage. I do believe I was 4-2 on Briar in the tournament, and then I was 1-1 on Chane. But the one loss to Chane, I got an IP2 for drawing too many cards and died to Chane on his blood death turn, his blood death turn. And just based on regular blocking card values, if I hadn't had that IP2, I would have made it, being at 24 life to his 8, I believe. So I do think that Katsu, I think he was underplayed, and so I think his rank in the meta is C because we didn't get to see him shine consistently. But I do think there was a place for him, but only in the beginning. I think once Oldhim became popular, frankly, I think playing Katsu was just unreasonable. Oldhim Crown Shield makes Kodachis useless, and you lose the ability to really start to mess with your opponent in the long term. And so I think Katsu's really going to need to find an answer to Oldhim and Everfest, or I just don't think we're going to be seeing him.
To that point, I would move Katsu above Dorinthea on the C bracket.
Yeah, I think that's fair. So let's go ahead and talk about Levia here. She's a tricky one. I know if we're talking like Man-Sant, it's like over here, but I think the reality is that Levia didn't really see a lot of success in tournaments, nor did she see a lot of play. I mean, I guess it's all bias. I do know there's a cult following of Levia players, but I just don't think we saw her presence, and I think that she can't push enough damage through control for the most part. There are game plans to get there that are a little bit less consistent, and she absolutely got rolled by Briar. What do you guys think?
Yeah, I think C's on point for Levia. I think in general, Brute has had the stigma for the longest time of, being RNG, slightly RNG related. It cannot be competitive, but I think as a community, players have been mitigating that RNG more and more effectively. There were definitely a few aggro Levia players that could steal matches easily. Is just that inconsistency still there to where we wouldn't see her in the top tables.
I'm going to move on, and I'm just going to do this as well, but I think we'll actually talk about this guy. So Zach, I know you've been learning up on Oldhim recently. I know we just watched you play a game in one of the Armory leagues. What's your opinion on Oldhim in the Tales of Aria meta?
It's funny because in the Tales of Aria meta, I think realistically he was A tier, and that was because he was underutilized. He wasn't played as much until the end of the meta, or essentially now with New Zealand and Australian nationals. I think kind of leading up to that, people were still playing Bravo pretty consistently for the easier Guardian strategy. Took a little bit longer to figure out ratios for Ice and Earth and varying builds from a mid-range sweet spot to completely control Oldhim, which was used more for drafting. Because of all of that, I would see him at the top of the A tier. Early Tales of Aria to mid Tales of Aria, and towards the end I would see him at S tier. I think he has the most consistent control matchup besides Prism to beat Briar. And I think it just took the community a lot longer to puzzle that out and get some consistent lists on the board for higher ranked tournaments.
Yeah. Chad McKittrick or any of the other Oldhim players, do you want to chime in?
I agree with pretty much everything Zach summarized. There's, as we've seen in the competitive team league, a pretty wide array of options in which you can go with Oldhim. So the delay in him really being looked at and coming out of into the spotlight in tournaments, I think there's still a lot to explore even within just the Aria meta. And
So
I would say S tier for sure, and possibly even more than we currently know.
I've got to transition into our next hero. So it's clear that the one hero that's gotten by far the most support from Wraith is Guardian, or the one class, and then we have Runeblade coming in the second set, and then of course Prism is the only new class. Illusionist is the only new class in Monarch. So my fears are that we'll see more Illusionist support. Obviously, I'm just a toxic Illusionist hater, but I think, and my team knows that. But I think that Prism really struggled in Aria meta with that transition. And I think that's really just because of Briar's ability to shred through. I think obviously we saw in the New Zealand Nationals, Prism was able to take down Oldhim, knock him down. Matt Rogers played a great game, and the Prism matchup was a very difficult one for Oldhim. So the fact that Prism was able to climb the ladder in that tournament really changes our perception of what that meta was. And, Nick Holding was absolutely dominant throughout the tournament. I think he had the best record going into the final. I think he had the best record going into day 2. So really, really exceptional play. So that makes Prism really hard to place. And I think that, if we're talking at the beginning of the meta, I think she's very obviously C. I think once you started, in tournaments, I can only speak for Nationals and the Orlando calling, but once you got past about round 3 or 4, you were seeing a lot less Prism. I think that's because of the number of Briars. So what do you guys think?
I think Prism had the biggest transition during the meta. I think most people who played through the Monarch meta realized that Prism, although it was a completely new class, had the most, at the time of Monarch's release, flexibility in terms of build. With your 80 card slots, you could easily go between mid-range and aggro or defensive. Even slightly like setup combo-y with auras. And I think just learning how to integrate that in a new meta took some time, similar to Oldhim. And once the deck testing, deck theory paid off, people realized she was able to fit that same kind of mold that Oldhim was, but better.
So it sounds to me like by the end of the meta, if we're talking pre-Plunder Run bans and Ball Lightning bans, it seems like Prism snuck her way into S tier. And I don't really see a ton to refute that. Frankly, I think Prism has a fine matchup into Ranger. Prism has a skill-based matchup in the dash. It can be like high roll, low roll based in that matchup, depending on, is dash boosting? Is dash playing for items? What do you hit first? Did Prism hit what she wanted first? Are you able to set up prismatic shields, which are especially really frustrating? Prismatic shields and aura into dash in the mid game. Prism plays fine into Chane. Prism plays great into Bravo. And so I think that as Prism players, and obviously Nick Holding the main one in that final weekend of the meta, is you're able to inch Prism back up to the S tier. And I'm apt to agree. Do you guys have any differences in opinions there?
My final comment on that is I'm not going to go too much into it because it's related to Viserai, but I think it's very similar to Viserai in the sense that people found Prism had the opportunity to high roll with prismatic shields and auras early game that cascade very well in her favor. And even if you're not hitting that, you still play a very well suited mid-range deck that has great matchups. So I think that's really what kept edging her up is the flexibility, and then also once you have that build where you can go mid-range into almost any matchup, you have that extra potential for just leaving with the early game, making it very difficult for really anyone other than like Bravo, Oldhim, or Briar to come back from.
So I want to let our Yazi Stan Jacob, really quickly place Rhinar. Jacob, where do you think Rhinar stands on this?
Yeah,
meta?
I gotta say, in this meta, Rhinar is pretty rough. At the beginning of the meta, I was actually planning to learn Rhinar and put quite a few games into him. But he's pretty rough to play against Briar. I love playing Rhinar into pretty much every other hero in this list, I would say. His games are very fun, and I think you can bring a lot of interesting play patterns. But I think he just had a really tough time dedicating the space to beat Briar while still being like a functioning deck. But I gotta say, I'm ready to pick up Rhinar for Everfest, so and I'm excited for that.
Yeah, I saw that new support. I forget the card's name, but the draw a card, discard 6+ gives go again unconditional.
Wild Ride.
Well,
Wild Ride.
independent of what your opponent does. Yeah, Wild Ride's a great name for that card. Very, I think LSS has really done well in the flavor of this set. But also, yeah, I think just that one card adds a lot of consistency to Rhinar. And so I think we'll see Rhinar climb, but I do have to put him down here, I think, as well. Just because, well, he plays fine into everybody else. He rarely has favorable matchups on this list. And I think for that reason as well, I think he's down there. And it's hard to say where to place him here, but I think we'll just move on to Viserai. Do we have I think Steven left, so unfortunately we don't have our resident Zach, I'm sorry, but Steven overtook you as our resident Viserai player. But I know Chad M and Zach and I have all put some time into Viserai, so Chad M, do you want to give us your take on Viserai real quick?
I think Viserai was quite viable. The flexibility of the game plan between OTK and going straight mid-range just gives you so many tools in coming to the different matchups that I think we saw again in the competitive team league some examples of the kind of power that Viserai can throw out there.
Yeah, I'm willing to put him in S tier, and I think Hayden Dale solidified that at the end of the meta. Matt Rogers started off the Aria meta over in the Orlando calling, quite strong, top 8ing that tournament with Viserai, and I agree. I mean, your ability to just say, oh, this hero wants to play the long game, or this hero is just going to pressure me enough, let me go defensive. And then when you get some of those matchups where it's going to be a little bit more mid-rangey, it's not as oppressive to you, you could start to combo. You could start to make some combos in the mid-range style build of Viserai. Main point being that you could just do that in the sideboard. You did not need 2 separate lists to play this way. You just need
to do it in the sideboard. Like as we saw Cody in the finals, you can change stance mid-game in the same game as it comes up.
That is very correct.
For sure. I think the biggest thing for Viserai is that pre-bans he was A tier, post-bans he moved up to S tier in my opinion. And not regarding the bans, but regarding the time frame of people doing more testing with Viserai. Because mid-range has been known for quite a while, but just getting that refining in, and also sideboard matchups. The general new strat seems to be just building up rune chance and racing someone like Oldhim, blocking out and doing a big Sonata combo, which we saw pay off in Australia. But I think in general it's just one of those time-gated things where he really moved up in the end as people realized his potential, the card pool.
Yeah, I do think that the bans of the 2 rune blades after him, the ones that had a little bit more, the play patterns were more obvious, the card pool's not as complicated. Having those bans really made the Runeblade community have to take a look at Viserai, and I think due to the success that you saw from Matt Rogers early in the season, it made it very easy for people to go in and test it. And then you had, obviously you had some longtime Viserai players pick it back up and start to excel. I do believe that Hayden was one of those. I do believe that Hayden, he used to write Viserai stuff back in the day. So Lots of success from Viserai players, and I think them biding their time, learning the card pool, and recognizing a meta that he fits well into really started to pay off. So I do agree. I do think he is in the S tier, and I do think he's really the he's probably, you know, assuming that this Prism list has adjusted for Briar. I do think he likely ends up having the best matchup into Prism as well.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think Viserai also kind of experiences the same phenomenon with Kano, where if you don't know your deck, you're gonna have a significantly harder game. But if you're a big brain, then you're gonna just roll everyone. Like I think, Sean, you've made this comment before. If there was someone who made a machine learning algorithm to play Kano, we probably just can't play Flesh and Blood anymore. And there might be something similar with Viserai, but he has a higher performance floor than Kano, I think, which helps him out a lot.
Yeah, I actually think that statement holds true for Viserai. I don't think it holds true for Kano, because I think Kano's design, like even a machine learning algorithm wouldn't be able to sort it. Sometimes there's just not enough oomph in the deck, because due to known information and whatever. But with Viserai's known information, you can really do a lot there. Anyways, I think we're gonna go ahead and wrap up the tier list there. I appreciate the team coming on to talk to you guys, and I appreciate you guys for watching. So thank you so much for tuning into Team Kitchen Fable. Please subscribe if you haven't. We're gonna be dropping more videos with the team like this very soon. We've got gameplay channel videos all over our channel, and we have some more video essays coming out on the horizon. Anyways, thank you so much for tuning into Team Kitchen Fable. We'll see you in the next one. Peace.